I was sitting in my kitchen when I heard her voice carry from the living room like a cold blade through warm air. "The old man's basically expired," Claire said with a laugh that had no warmth in it. "I mean, what's the point of keeping him around? He just takes up space." My coffee cup stopped halfway to my lips. Through the doorway, I could see my son Daniel on the couch, his shoulders tense, saying nothing. My grandson Ethan sat cross-legged on the floor with his tablet, pretending not to hear. "Claire," Daniel's voice was quiet, careful. "That's my father you're talking about." "Exactly. Your father, not mine. I didn't sign up to babysit someone else's parent." She was folding laundry with sharp, efficient movements. "Look at this place, Daniel. We could have the whole apartment to ourselves. Ethan could have a proper room instead of sharing space with Grandpa's medicine bottles and old newspapers." Expired. The word sat in my chest like a stone. I set the cup down carefully, making no sound. 45 years I'd worked construction, building homes for families like this one. 23 years since Margaret passed, and I'd managed just fine on my own until the stroke last year. 6 months living with them in the apartment I'd bought and paid for, trying to stay out of their way, trying not to be a burden. Expired. "Mom, why can't Grandpa stay?" Ethan's voice was small, confused. "He helps me with my math homework." "Honey, sometimes adults need to make difficult decisions. Grandpa would be happier in a place with other people his age." Other people his age, as if I was some product past its sell-by date, ready for disposal. I reached into my shirt pocket and pulled out the photograph I always carried. Daniel at Ethan's age, gap-toothed and grinning, sitting on my shoulders at the county fair, back when I was strong enough to carry him anywhere, back when Daddy could fix anything. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, each second marking time I apparently no longer deserved. "We'll figure something out," Daniel said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Maybe we can look into some options." Options. Not a place for me to stay. Options for getting rid of the old man who'd outlived his welcome. I folded the photograph and slipped it back into my pocket. My hands were steady, though something cold and final was settling in my chest. Claire thought she was discussing my future, like I was a piece of furniture to be moved or discarded. She had no idea she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. Through the doorway, I watched my son nod along with his wife's plans, watched my grandson pretend to focus on his screen while adults decided his grandfather was disposable. The apartment grew quiet, except for the relentless ticking of the clock and the soft rustle of Claire's folding. I sat in that kitchen chair for 20 more minutes, listening to them discuss nursing homes and assisted living facilities, their voices growing more animated as they planned their expanded living space. Not once did Daniel ask what I wanted. Not once did anyone consider that the man they were discussing might have opinions about his own future. When I finally stood up, my decision was already made. Claire wanted the old man gone. Fine. But she was about to learn that being old didn't mean being powerless. The next morning, I tried to make things normal. I made breakfast for Ethan like I always did. Scrambled eggs and toast, cut into triangles the way he liked. When he came to the kitchen, his eyes were different. Careful. "Morning, Grandpa," he said, but he didn't meet my eyes. "Morning, buddy. Sleep okay?" He nodded and ate quietly. Usually he chattered about school, about his friends, about the video game he was playing. Today, he just chewed and glanced toward the living room where his parents were getting ready for work. When Daniel came in for coffee, he cleared his throat like he was preparing for something difficult. "Dad, we need to talk later about arrangements." Arrangements. Another word that made my teeth clench. "Sure, son." Claire swept through in her business suit, checking her phone. She looked at me like I was a stain on her perfectly organized morning. "Charles, I'm going to need you to not answer the door today. We're expecting some people to look at the apartment layout." She didn't explain who these people were or why they needed to see the layout. She didn't need to. "This is my home, too," I said quietly. She paused, her hand on her purse strap. "Well, legally speaking, that's complicated." Legally speaking, as if the $40,000 I'd put down for this place, the monthly payments I'd helped with for 3 years before moving in, meant nothing. As if having my name on the deed was just a technicality. "I helped buy this apartment, Claire." "That was a gift to Daniel," she said smoothly. "Ancient history. Ancient history. Like me." After they left, I sat in my chair by the window and called the bank. Asked about the mortgage records, the payment history, the original down payment. The woman on the phone was patient, pulling up files that went back 7 years. "Yes, Mr. Morrison, I see your contribution here. 40,000 initial payment. Then you covered 6 months of mortgage payments in 2019 when your son was between jobs." 6 months. I remembered that time. Daniel had been laid off from the marketing firm and Claire was pregnant with complications. They needed bed rest money, grocery money, mortgage money. I'd emptied my savings without hesitation because that's what family does. Family? What a joke. I hung up and looked around the apartment with new eyes. The furniture I'd helped buy, the down payment I'd made, the months I'd kept them afloat. Now I was taking up space, an inconvenience to be managed. At lunch, I tried calling Daniel at work. "Dad, I'm in a meeting," he said, his voice hushed. "Can we talk tonight?" "It's important, son." "So is this presentation. We'll talk later, okay?" The line went silent. My son, who used to call me every Sunday just to chat, who used to bring Ethan over every weekend to help with little projects around my old house, couldn't spare 5 minutes. That afternoon, the doorbell rang 3 times. Each time I looked through the peephole and saw people with clipboards and measuring tapes, realtors maybe, interior designers, people planning a future that didn't include me. I didn't answer the door. When Ethan came home from school, he found me reading in my chair. "Grandpa, Mom said some people came by today." "They did? Are we moving?" The question hung between us. This 12-year-old boy asking the question his parents should have asked me directly. "I don't know, buddy. What do you think about that?" He sat on the floor next to my chair, the way he always did when something was bothering him. "I don't want you to go away. You're the only one who listens to my jokes." My chest tightened. "Your jokes are pretty good." "Mom and Dad are always busy. You play chess with me." "I like playing chess with you." He was quiet for a moment. "Are you sick? Like really sick?" "No, Ethan, I'm not sick." "Then why do they want you to go to one of those places?" One of those places. Even at 12, he understood what was happening. "Sometimes adults make decisions that are hard to understand," I said, using Claire's own words. That's what Mom said. But she says that when she doesn't want to tell me the truth. Smart kid. Too smart. That evening, Daniel sat me down at the kitchen table like I was a child who needed discipline. Dad, we've been thinking. There's a really nice assisted living place about 20 minutes from here. They have activities, people your age, medical staff on site. I don't need medical staff. But if something happens, something like what, Daniel? He looked uncomfortable. You know, health issues, falls. We just think you'd be safer. Safer. More convenient was what he meant. What about Ethan? Who's going to help him with his homework? Dad, he's getting older. He needs to be more independent. Independent. Another word that meant I wasn't needed anymore. I looked at my son. Really looked at him. When had he become someone who could sit across from his father and plan his removal with such calm efficiency? When had he learned to speak in corporate buzzwords about family decisions? This is Claire's idea, I said. His jaw tightened. This is our decision, mine and Claire's. We're married, Dad. We make decisions together. Together. Just not with me. I helped buy this apartment, son. That was 7 years ago. That was help, not ownership. Help. As if I was some distant relative who'd contributed to a charity fund. That night, I lay in my bed, listening to them talk in their room across the hall. Their voices carried through the thin walls. Claire's sharp and decisive. Daniel's quieter, but agreeing. They were discussing timeline, logistics, how to break it to Ethan. How to break it to Ethan, not how to discuss it with me. I got up and walked to the window. The city lights stretched out below. Thousands of families in their own boxes of glass and steel, living their own complicated lives. Somewhere out there were other old people like me, other fathers who'd outlived their usefulness, but I wasn't gone yet, and I wasn't powerless. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't called in months. Morgan Realty, the woman who'd helped me buy this place 7 years ago. It was 10:30 at night, but I composed a text message. Hello, Morgan. This is Charles Morrison. Need to discuss selling property. Can you call tomorrow? I sent it and set the phone on my nightstand. Expired. We'd see about that. Morgan called at 9 the next morning while Claire and Daniel were at work and Ethan was at school. Charles, good to hear from you. It's been what, 7 years? How's the family? That's actually why I'm calling, Morgan. I need to sell the apartment. There was a pause. The Wellington Street place? But didn't you just move in with your son recently? 6 months ago, things have changed. Her voice became careful, professional. I see. Well, I'd need to do a current market assessment, but that area has appreciated significantly. You're probably looking at around $450,000, maybe more depending on condition and recent renovations. $450,000. I'd put down $40,000 7 years ago when the place cost $280,000. Daniel and Claire had been making payments, sure, but they still owed about $190,000 to the bank. The deed, I said. Remind me how we structured that. You're listed as the primary owner, Charles. Your son is co-owner, but since you put down the initial payment and your name is first on all the documents, well, you have the legal right to sell. Legal right. The words Claire had thrown at me yesterday turned around. How quickly could we move on this? If you're serious, I could have someone out there tomorrow for photos and assessment. In this market, a nice two-bedroom in your building, we could have offers within a week. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet apartment and really looked at it. The furniture Daniel and Claire had chosen, the flat-screen TV they'd insisted they needed, the expensive coffee maker that only Claire knew how to use. All of it bought with the assumption that they had all the time in the world to enjoy it. The apartment had been my investment in their future, my way of making sure my son had stability, that my grandson had a good home. But somewhere along the way, it had become their right and my burden. I pulled out the folder I kept in my bedroom, the one with all the financial documents, bank statements showing my $40,000 down payment, mortgage papers with my name listed first, insurance documents, property tax receipts that came to my address. Everything was in order. Everything was legal. At noon, my phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Dad, can we finish our talk tonight? Claire made a reservation at Sunrise Manor for you to visit tomorrow." Sunrise Manor. They'd already picked out where to store me. I didn't text back. Instead, I called my old friend Garrett. We'd worked construction together for 20 years, and he was the only person who'd visited me regularly since Margaret passed, the only one who remembered who I used to be. "Charlie, you sound different," he said when he heard my voice. "I need advice, Garrett. Can you come over?" Now. He arrived an hour later, looking concerned. Garrett was 72, 3 years older than me, but he still had the build of a man who'd spent his life working with his hands. He took one look at my face and sat down heavily in the chair across from me. "What's going on, Charlie?" I told him everything. The conversation I'd overheard, the constant dismissals, the assisted living facility they'd already chosen for me. When I got to the part about Claire calling me expired, his face darkened. "That cold little witch," he said, and I didn't correct him. "I'm selling the apartment, Garrett." His eyebrows shot up. "You're what?" "I'm selling it. It's in my name. I put down the down payment. I have every legal right." "Charlie, that's nuclear. You realize that? They want me gone anyway. This way, I leave on my own terms." Garrett was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. "You remember when we were building the Henderson house? That big colonial out in Westfield?" I nodded. "The client kept changing the plans. Every week something new. Move this wall, change that window, different flooring. We kept doing it because the money was good. But you remember what you told me after the third major change?" "No." "You said, 'Garrett, sometimes you have to stop bending or you'll break in half.' You walked off that job, Charlie. Left good money on the table because you knew they'd never stop pushing." I remembered now. Henderson had been furious, threatened to sue. But I'd been right. He ran through 2 more contractors after us, and the house still wasn't finished a year later. "This is the same thing," Garrett said quietly. "They'll keep pushing until there's nothing left of you." "So, you think I'm right to sell?" He looked around the apartment, taking in the expensive furnishings, the carefully decorated walls, the sense of a life built around people who no longer wanted the builder in it. "I think you're the only one who gets to decide what your life is worth, Charlie." That evening, when Daniel and Claire came home with take-out Chinese food, they seemed almost cheerful. Claire was talking about the visit to Sunrise Manor, how nice the rooms were, how much I'd enjoy the activities. They have a woodworking shop, Dad, Daniel said, unpacking containers. You'd love that. And the staff is very experienced with people your age, Claire added. People with your needs. My needs, as if being 68 was a medical condition. I've been thinking about what we discussed, I said carefully. They both looked up, hopeful. I think you're right. Maybe it is time for a change. Claire's face lit up like she'd won the lottery. Oh, Charles, that's wonderful. I knew you'd see reason once you thought about it. I called someone today about making arrangements. Daniel smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in weeks. That's great, Dad. We can drive you over to Sunrise Manor tomorrow, get you settled in. Actually, I said, setting down my chopsticks, I called a realtor. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. A realtor? Claire's voice was very small. Morgan Realty. She's coming tomorrow to assess the apartment for sale. Daniel's face went white. Dad, you can't. This is our home. It's my apartment, son. My name on the deed, my down payment, my decision. Claire stood up so fast her chair nearly toppled. You can't do this. We have a life here. Ethan's school is here. You said I was expired, I said quietly. You said I was taking up space. I'm just giving you what you wanted. The look on her face was worth every sleepless night, every ignored phone call, every moment I'd felt invisible in my own investment. Daniel, tell him he can't do this. But Daniel was staring at me with something that might have been respect or fear, maybe both. Can he, Daniel? I asked. Can he really stop me? My son opened his mouth, then closed it, because he knew what I knew. The apartment was mine to sell, and tomorrow everything was going to change. Morgan arrived at 10 the next morning with a photographer and a measuring tape. She was a sharp woman in her 50s, all business but with kind eyes that remembered our history together. Charles, this is a beautiful place. You and your son have maintained it well. She walked through the rooms, making notes on her tablet. The hardwood floors are in excellent condition. Kitchen renovations look recent, and that view of the park adds significant value. I followed her through the apartment, seeing it through a buyer's eyes. Claire had good taste. I'd give her that. Everything was coordinated, clean, expensive. The kind of home young professionals dreamed of owning. What are we looking at price-wise? I asked. Market's hot right now. I'm thinking $460, maybe $475. Could go higher if we get multiple offers. She paused at the living room window. Mind if I ask why you're selling? This seems like a perfect setup for a family. It was, I said. Things change. She nodded like she understood without needing details. 25 years in real estate, she'd probably seen every family drama imaginable. While the photographer worked, Morgan and I sat at the kitchen table going over paperwork, the mortgage balance, the deed information, the timeline for listing. We could have this on the market by Friday, she said. Professional photos today, virtual tour tomorrow. Listing goes live Thursday night. Weekend showings start Saturday. How long until closing? In this market, 4 to 6 weeks if we get a cash offer, 8 weeks if the buyer needs financing. She looked at me carefully. Charles, this is a big step. Are you absolutely certain? Before I could answer, the front door opened. Claire's voice carried down the hallway. I forgot my presentation folder. She stopped dead when she saw Morgan and the photographer. Mrs. Morrison, Morgan said pleasantly. Good to see you again. Claire's face was pale. What's going on here? Property assessment, Morgan replied. Charles has decided to sell. He can't do that. Claire's voice was shaking. Daniel, get in here. My son appeared in the doorway, still in his work clothes. His face went through several expressions when he saw the camera equipment and the papers spread across the table. Dad, please, let's talk about this rationally. I am being rational, son. This is my apartment. I'm exercising my right to sell it. But where will we live? Claire's voice cracked. We can't afford another place like this. The school district, Ethan's friends. You should have thought about that before you decided I was expired. The photographer cleared his throat awkwardly. Should I come back later? No, I said firmly. Keep working. Daniel sat down across from me, his hand shaking slightly. Dad, I know Claire said some things she shouldn't have, but you can't destroy our family over words. Words have consequences, Daniel. You taught me that when you were 12 years old. Remember when you called your mother fat and she cried for 3 hours? His face flushed. That was different. I was a child. And you learned that words can hurt people. Apparently, that lesson didn't stick. Claire was pacing now, her phone in her hand. I'm calling a lawyer. There has to be something we can do. Call whoever you want, I said calmly. The deed is clear. The down payment came from my account. The mortgage is in my name first. You'll waste money on legal fees and get nothing. Dad, Daniel's voice was desperate now. What do you want? What can we do to fix this? It was a good question. What did I want? An apology? Respect? The chance to live in peace without being made to feel like a burden? I want to not be called expired in my own home, I said quietly. I want my grandson to know I'm not a problem to be solved. I want to live somewhere I'm wanted, not somewhere I'm tolerated. We want you here, Daniel said, but his voice lacked conviction. Do you, son? Really? Because yesterday you made a reservation at an assisted living facility without asking what I wanted. You've been planning my removal for weeks, maybe months. The only difference is now I'm controlling the timeline. The photographer finished in the bedrooms and moved to the bathroom. Each camera flash felt like another nail in the coffin of their assumptions. How much? Claire asked suddenly. How much what? How much money do you want? To change your mind, name a price. I looked at her for a long moment. Even now, she thought this was about money. She couldn't conceive that it was about dignity, about being treated like a human being instead of an inconvenience. Claire, you can't buy back what you threw away. My phone buzzed. A text from Garrett. How's it going over there? I typed back. Photographer just finished. Listing goes live Thursday. His response was immediate. Good for you, Charlie. Stand your ground. Daniel saw me texting. Who's that? Garrett. He thinks I'm doing the right thing. Garrett doesn't have to live with the consequences, Claire snapped. Neither do you, I said. You made it clear you don't want to live with me. The apartment fell silent except for the sound of the photographer packing his equipment. Morgan finished her notes and stood up. Charles, I'll have the preliminary listing ready by tomorrow afternoon. We'll schedule the first showings for this weekend." She looked at Daniel and Claire. "I'm sorry this is difficult for everyone." After they left, the three of us sat in the living room like strangers. Ethan would be home from school in an hour, and nobody had figured out what to tell him. "Dad," Daniel said finally, "what happens to us? You're 40 years old, Daniel. You'll figure it out. The mortgage alone is $2,800 a month, plus utilities, maintenance, property taxes. We can't afford that without your help. You should have thought of that before you decided I was ancient history." Claire was crying now, quiet tears that she kept wiping away. "I was angry. I said things I didn't mean. You meant them when you said them. That's what matters. So that's it? One conversation and you're willing to destroy everything?" I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the park where I'd taken Ethan to feed the ducks just last weekend, where he'd told me about the girl in his class he liked, where we'd talked about his science project, where I'd felt like I still mattered to someone. Claire, it wasn't one conversation. It was 6 months of conversations, 6 months of being made to feel unwelcome in my own investment. 6 months of being discussed like I wasn't in the room, planned around like I was furniture. "We never said you weren't welcome." You didn't have to say it. The front door opened and Ethan's voice called out, "I'm home." His backpack hit the floor with a thud, and his footsteps approached the living room. He stopped when he saw our faces. "What's wrong? Why is everyone crying?" Daniel cleared his throat. "Buddy, we need to talk to you about some changes." "Are we moving?" "Maybe," Claire said through her tears. Ethan looked at me. "Grandpa, are you sick again?" "No, son, I'm not sick." "Then why do we have to move?" The question hung in the air. How do you explain to a 12-year-old that his parents decided his grandfather was disposable, and now that grandfather was taking back his property? How do you make a child understand adult cruelty and consequences? "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, Ethan," I said carefully, "and sometimes those mistakes have big results." "What kind of mistakes?" Daniel and Claire looked at me, waiting to see what I would say, whether I would throw them under the bus or protect their relationship with their son. "The kind that hurt people's feelings very badly," I said. "The kind that make people feel unwanted." "Did someone make you feel unwanted, Grandpa?" The innocent question cut through all the justifications and explanations. A child's clarity, seeing straight to the heart of the matter. "Yes, buddy, they did." "That's mean." His face scrunched up with 12-year-old indignation. "Who made you feel unwanted?" I looked at Daniel and Claire, both of them pale and waiting. "It doesn't matter now, Ethan. What matters is that Grandpa is going to find a place where he feels wanted." "Can I come with you?" The question broke something inside my chest. This child, innocent and loyal, offering to abandon his life because he understood, in his simple way, that what was happening was wrong. "You belong with your mom and dad, buddy, but you can visit me wherever I go." "Promise?" "Promise." That evening, after Ethan went to bed, Daniel knocked on my bedroom door. "Dad, can we talk? Just you and me?" I followed him to the kitchen. He made 2 cups of coffee, the way he used to when he was in college and would come home for advice about girls or jobs or life decisions. "I've been a terrible son," he said without preamble. I didn't disagree. "I let Claire. I let the situation get out of hand. I should have stood up for you. Yes, you should have. I was scared, Dad. Claire can be difficult when she doesn't get her way. And I thought you'd understand. I thought you'd be okay with the assisted living place. Without asking me? Without asking you? He stared into his coffee. That was wrong. Yes, it was. Is there anything I can do? Anything at all? I looked at my son, really looked at him. He looked tired, older than his 40 years, caught between a wife who demanded he choose and a father he'd failed to protect. You can learn from this, Daniel. You can teach your son that family doesn't get discarded when they become inconvenient. Are you really going to sell the apartment? The listing goes live Thursday night. He nodded slowly. Where will you go? I'll figure it out. Will you stay in touch? The question was small, vulnerable. My 40-year-old son, asking if his father would still love him after this betrayal. You're still my son, Daniel. That doesn't change. Relief flooded his face. Thank you. But forgiveness and trust were different things. He was learning that now, at 40, the same lesson I'd learned at 68. Some bridges, once burned, take a very long time to rebuild. The listing went live Thursday night at 7 p.m. By Friday morning, Morgan had called with 3 showing requests for the weekend. Charles, I've never seen response like this. We've got a young couple coming Saturday at 10, a family with teenagers at noon, and an investment buyer at 3. I'm expecting more calls today. I sat in my chair by the window, watching Daniel get ready for work. He moved differently now, slower, more careful, like a man walking through a minefield. Claire hadn't spoken to me since Tuesday. She communicated through Daniel or left notes on the kitchen counter. How long do I need to be out during showings? I asked Morgan. 2 hours should be plenty for each appointment. Is there somewhere you can go? Somewhere to go. The question hit harder than it should have. For 6 months, this apartment had been my somewhere to go. Before that, my house had been sold to pay for Margaret's medical bills and my own recovery after the stroke. My world had shrunk to this living room chair and the route to Ethan's school. I'll figure something out. After Morgan hung up, I called Garrett. Charlie, you doing okay? You sound tired. First showing is tomorrow. I need to be out of the apartment for a few hours. Come over here. We'll work on that table you started before you moved in with them. The maple one. I'd forgotten about the table. 6 months ago felt like another lifetime. I don't have my tools anymore. Daniel stored them in his basement. I've got everything you need. Come early, stay for dinner. Sharon's making pot roast. Garrett's wife, Sharon, had been Margaret's best friend. After Margaret passed, Sharon had tried to mother me the way some women mother stray cats, with fierce determination and casseroles that showed up without explanation. Thanks, Garrett. I'll see you tomorrow. That evening at dinner, Ethan asked the question we'd all been avoiding. When do we have to move, Grandpa? Daniel set down his fork. Buddy, we don't know yet. These things take time. But the apartment is sold? It's for sale, Claire said tightly. Nothing is final yet. I looked at my grandson, this boy who was learning too young that adults don't always tell the truth, don't always keep promises, don't always protect the people they're supposed to love. Ethan, people are coming to look at the apartment this weekend. If they like it, they might want to buy it. What if they don't like it? Then other people will come look. What if nobody wants it? The hopeful note in his voice broke my heart. This child wishing his home would be rejected so his grandfather wouldn't leave. Someone will want it, buddy. It's a beautiful apartment. I don't want you to go away. The sentence hung over the dinner table like smoke. Daniel and Claire stared at their plates. I don't want to go away either, I said honestly, but sometimes things happen that change everything. Like when Grandma died? Something like that. After dinner, Ethan helped me with dishes the way he always did, standing on the step stool Margaret had bought him, drying plates with exaggerated "Care." Grandpa, can I ask you something? Always. Did Mom and Dad do something bad? I stopped washing and looked at him. 12 years old, but old enough to sense the undercurrents, to know that good families don't usually sell their homes and separate their members. They made some mistakes, Ethan, grown-up mistakes. The kind where you have to say sorry. The kind where saying sorry isn't enough anymore. He dried a glass thoughtfully. Like when I broke Tommy Peterson's bike and just saying sorry didn't fix it? Exactly like that. But you forgave me when I broke your coffee mug. That was an accident. You didn't mean to break it. What if Mom and Dad didn't mean to hurt your feelings? The question was too perceptive, too adult. I set down the sponge and dried my hands. Intent matters, buddy, but impact matters too. If I accidentally stepped on your foot, you'd still hurt, even though I didn't mean to do it. And if I kept stepping on your foot after you told me it hurt? Smart kid. Too smart. Then it wouldn't be an accident anymore, would it? Saturday morning, I left for Garrett's house at 9:30. Daniel was still in his pajamas, looking hollow-eyed and nervous. Dad, maybe you should be here to answer questions about the apartment. The realtor can answer questions, son. I don't think my presence would help anything. Claire emerged from the bedroom in designer jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check. She'd obviously decided to be present for the showings, to protect her territory. Charles, she said stiffly, when will you be back? This evening. We need to discuss logistics. Logistics. Even now, she couldn't say the word consequences. At Garrett's house, the maple table was exactly where I'd left it 6 months ago, half finished, sanded to silk, waiting for the final assembly and stain. You want to finish this beauty? Garrett asked, running his hand over the wood. I don't know where I'd put it. Cross that bridge when you come to it. Right now, just work. There's something about working with wood that quiets the noise in your head. The grain doesn't lie, doesn't manipulate, doesn't call you names behind your back. It's just wood, honest and straightforward, responding to skill and patience. We worked in comfortable silence, me fitting joints while Garrett prepared the stain. Sharon brought us coffee and didn't ask questions about the apartment or the family drama. She just squeezed my shoulder and left us to our work. At noon, my phone rang. Morgan. Charles, the first showing went very well. They loved the space, especially the kitchen renovations. They asked about timing, when possession would be available. What did you tell them? That we'd need to discuss it. The noon appointment just arrived. Young family with a teenage daughter. The father's already talking about which room would be the girl's bedroom. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction that my investment was valuable, that people wanted what I was giving up. Sadness that I was giving it up at all. Keep me posted. At 2 o'clock, Sharon called us for lunch. Pot roast with vegetables, the kind of meal Margaret used to make on Sundays when life was simpler and families stayed together. "Charlie," Sharon said, passing the rolls, "Garrett told me about the apartment." I nodded, not trusting my voice. That girl has no idea what she's thrown away. "Sharon," Garrett warned. "No, I'm going to say this. Margaret would have scratched that woman's eyes out for treating you like that, and your son should be ashamed of himself." "It's complicated," I said. "It's not complicated. It's cruel, and cruelty is a choice." She was right, of course, but knowing that didn't make the situation less painful. My phone rang again at 3:15. Morgan, excited. "Charles, we have an offer. The investment buyer just submitted a bid. $475,000 all cash, 30-day closing, $475,000. After paying off the remaining mortgage, I'd walk away with close to $300,000. Enough to buy a small place of my own, enough for independence, enough for dignity." "What do you think?" I asked. "It's a strong offer. Full asking price, quick closing, no financing contingencies. I'd take it." "Let me think about it." "Don't think too long. In this market, good offers don't wait." I hung up and stared at Garrett's workbench, covered with tools that had built a lifetime of furniture, houses, memories. "Good news?" Garrett asked. "Full price offer. Cash." He nodded slowly. "How do you feel?" "Like I'm jumping off a cliff. Sometimes that's the only way forward." At 4 o'clock, I called Morgan back. "Accept the offer." "Excellent. I'll draw up the acceptance papers." "Charles, you're making the right decision." The right decision? Maybe. Or maybe it was just the only decision left. I drove back to the apartment at 5, my hand steady on the wheel, but my heart racing. The hallway seemed different, like I was seeing it for the first time or the last time. The door that had been my refuge for 6 months now felt like a threshold to something unknown. Inside, Daniel and Claire were sitting at the kitchen table with papers spread between them, rental listings, mortgage information, calculators, planning their next move. "How did the showings go?" I asked. Daniel looked up. 3 different groups. They all seemed interested. "We got an offer." Claire's face went white. "Already?" "Full asking price. Cash. 30 days to closing." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Daniel's hands were shaking as he shuffled through the rental listings. "Dad, these apartments, they're all so expensive and small and not in Ethan's school district." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided I was expired." "I never said that," Daniel protested. "You never stopped it either." Ethan appeared in the doorway, backpack sliding off his shoulder. "Grandpa, you're back. Did you have a good day?" "I did, buddy. I finished a table at Uncle Garrett's house." "Can I see it?" "Someday, when I have a place to put it." "Will your new place have room for me to visit?" "It will have room for you to visit." "Promise?" "Promise." That night, after Ethan went to bed, I sat in my chair by the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there was my future, uncertain, scary, but mine to choose. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. I felt free. My phone buzzed with a text from Morgan. "Congratulations, Charles. Papers will be ready Monday morning. You've made a brave choice." Brave. I'd never thought of it that way. It felt more like survival. But maybe survival was brave enough. Akt 6. 7 symbolov. Ответ поиск. 3 weeks after the papers were signed, I was sitting in my new apartment, a modest one-bedroom place 15 minutes from downtown, with a small balcony that caught the morning sun. The maple table from Garrett's workshop sat in the living room, its honey-colored finish glowing in the afternoon light. I'd been unpacking boxes all morning, finding places for the life I'd salvaged from the wreckage. Not much, really. Some clothes, books, photographs, the few pieces of furniture that were truly mine. But it felt like enough. The silence was different here. Not the oppressive quiet of walking on eggshells, but the peaceful quiet of a man who didn't have to justify his presence in his own home. My phone rang. "Ethan." "Grandpa, can you talk?" "Always, buddy. How are you?" "Okay, I guess." We moved into a smaller apartment. I have to share a bathroom with Mom and Dad now. I closed my eyes. "How do you like your new school?" "It's okay. The kids are nice, but I miss my old friends." Of course he did. Children pay the price for adult decisions, always. "Grandpa, can I come visit you this weekend?" I looked around my small apartment at the single bedroom, the narrow kitchen, the living room that was just big enough for the essentials. "What do your parents say?" "Dad says it's okay. Mom says ... He paused. "Mom says you're still mad at her?" "What do you think, Ethan?" "I think grown-ups make everything too complicated." I laughed, the first real laugh I'd had in months. "You're probably right about that." "So can I come?" "Saturday morning. I'll pick you up at 9. Will you show me how to use your woodworking tools? Dad says you have a whole workshop now." "Not a whole workshop. Just a corner of the basement that the landlord said I could use with some basic tools Garrett had helped me buy. But to a 12-year-old boy, it probably seemed like a kingdom." "I'll teach you to make something. What would you like to build?" "A birdhouse for my new bedroom window." After we hung up, I sat in my chair, the only piece of furniture I'd taken from the old apartment, and thought about irony. I was living in a smaller space with less comfort, fewer amenities, but I felt like a giant. The doorbell rang. I opened it to find Daniel standing in the hallway, looking older than his 40 years, holding a manila envelope. "Hi, Dad." "Daniel, come in." He looked around the apartment, taking in the sparse but comfortable furnishings, the photographs on the mantel, the table that dominated the small living room. "It's nice," he said, and seemed to mean it. "Quiet." "It is." He sat on the small couch I'd bought from a second-hand store. "Dad, I came to give you this." He held out the envelope. "What is it?" "The profit from the apartment sale. After the mortgage was paid off, after the realtor's commission, there was about $40,000 left over. Claire thinks, we think it should go to you." I took the envelope but didn't open it. "Why?" "Because it was your investment. Because we treated you badly. Because ... His voice cracked. "Because I'm ashamed of what we did." "Keep the money, Daniel. Use it to get back on your feet." "Dad, we can't. It's not right." I looked at my son, really looked at him. The stress of the past month had carved lines around his eyes, made his shoulders sag. Moving, changing schools for Ethan, dealing with a wife who was learning that actions had consequences. It had aged him. How's Claire? Angry, scared, realizing that the comfortable life she took for granted is gone. He ran his hands through his hair. She keeps saying you overreacted. Do you think I overreacted? He was quiet for a long time. I think you did what you had to do. I think we pushed you until you had no choice. And now? Now we're learning to live with the consequences. Claire's working extra hours. I picked up a weekend job. Ethan's adjusting to a new school. He looked around the apartment again. But you seem peaceful. Peaceful. It was the right word. I am. Dad, is there any chance? Could we try to rebuild this? As a family? The question I'd been expecting. The one I'd been dreading. Daniel, I love you. I love Ethan. That will never change. But trust is like china, son. Once it's shattered, you can glue the pieces back together, but it's never quite the same. His face crumpled. So that's it? We're done? We're not done. But we're different now. We're going to have to learn each other all over again. He nodded, wiping his eyes. Fair enough. We sat in silence for a while, two men who shared history and DNA, and the painful knowledge that love isn't always enough to bridge the gaps we create. Ethan's coming to visit Saturday, I said finally. I know. He's excited. He talks about you every day. How does Claire feel about that? She knows she can't stop it. She also knows that trying to would just make everything worse. Smart woman, finally learning the limits of her control. Daniel, can I ask you something? Anything. At what point did you stop seeing me as your father and start seeing me as a burden? The question hung between us. He stared at his hands for a long time before answering. I don't think I ever stopped seeing you as my father. I think I started seeing myself as caught between two people I loved, and I chose the wrong one to protect. Why? Because Claire was immediate. Her anger, her demands, her threats to make life difficult if I didn't side with her. He looked up at me. You were patient, understanding. I thought you'd always be there no matter what. I took advantage of that. Honesty. Finally, some honesty. Your mother would have been disappointed in both of us, I said. In both of us? I should have spoken up sooner, set boundaries, demanded the respect I deserved instead of hoping it would be offered. Dad, you shouldn't have had to demand respect in your own home. No, I shouldn't have, but I should have demanded it when it wasn't offered. He stood up, leaving the envelope on the coffee table. I need to go. Claire's cooking dinner, and I promised Ethan I'd help with his homework. How's he doing? Really? He misses you. He asks every day when you're coming home. Daniel's voice broke on the last word. I had to explain that you weren't coming home. That home isn't home anymore. After he left, I opened the envelope. A cashier's check for $42,000. Money that would give me even more security, more independence, more options. But I wouldn't cash it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Saturday morning, I picked up Ethan as promised. He ran out of their new apartment building like he was escaping, throwing his arms around me with the fierce love of a child who'd been afraid his grandfather might disappear forever. Grandpa, I missed you so much. I missed you too, buddy. We spent the day building the birdhouse, his small hands learning to hold the tools, to measure twice and cut once, to sand with the grain instead of against it. The same lessons my father had taught me, that I'd taught Daniel, that were now passing to another generation. "Grandpa," Ethan said as we painted the finished birdhouse blue, his favorite color, "are you happier now?" "What makes you ask that?" "You smile more, and your voice doesn't sound tired anymore." "Out of the mouths of babes, I think I am happier, Ethan. Even though we don't live together anymore? Even though we don't live together anymore?" He considered this, his brush dripping blue paint onto the newspaper we'd spread on the table. "Sometimes things have to break before they can get better." "Where did you hear that?" "Dad said it, when I was crying about leaving my old school." Daniel, still teaching his son life lessons, even in the middle of crisis. Your dad's right about that. So maybe our family had to break a little bit so it could get better? I looked at this wise 12-year-old boy, paint on his nose, hope in his eyes, and felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, not forgetting, but something like possibility. Maybe it did, buddy. Maybe it did. That evening, as I drove Ethan back to his new apartment, he asked one more question. "Grandpa, will you still be my grandpa even if we don't live in the same house?" I pulled over and turned to face him in the back seat. "Ethan, I will be your grandpa until the day I die. Nothing can change that. Not arguments, not different apartments, not anything. Do you understand?" He nodded solemnly. "And I'll still be your grandson, forever and always." A month later, I got a text message from Claire, just 4 words. "I'm sorry I failed." I stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "We all failed. We all survived." She didn't respond, and I didn't expect her to, but it was a start. On Sundays now, Ethan comes over and we work on projects together. Small things. A jewelry box for his mother, a phone stand for his father, picture frames for his new bedroom. Daniel picks him up in the evenings, and sometimes he stays for coffee. We're building something new. Not the family we were, but the family we might become. Careful, respectful, honest about our scars. The maple table sits in my living room, solid and beautiful, a reminder that some things can be built to last. Other things break and need to be rebuilt differently. Both have their place in a life well lived. I am no longer expired. I am exactly where I need to be.